Good afternoon, guys. It is September 4th, 2023. In this video here, I want to talk to you about growing up um, on a lower income. Um, Now, I wouldn't say that we were like low income when I was growing up, my parents, but I know that every day was a struggle to get by. And I know that there were a lot of things that we just couldn't afford, straight up. It just wasn't an option. Um, and I just want to talk about this because I'm noticing that in our culture today, we have so much entitlement and so many things that people just think that, they have to have. And, you know, to tell you the truth, what it boils down to is we need to cover our four, you know, Dave Ramsey uses this analogy, and I love, Dave Ramsey and a bunch of other, financial people. But Dave Ramsey always uses this analogy of your four walls, and that's food, shelter, clothing, and transportation. If those four walls are covered, then everything else is pretty much optional. It's just, so if you think about it in those terms, there there's times where you're just in survival mode. I mean, it's just you're just trying to live on what you have, and you know no, it's not necessarily fun. um you know I've never personally like struggled really bad, but I've seen it around me, and I kind of understand some of what that means. And so I think, there are advantages to growing up on a lower income, um, and not being able to afford to do as much because honestly, you know, we may not have been rich when I was growing up, but I can tell you that it gave me a lot of wisdom, a lot of it just gave me a lot to be thankful for. I was very, you know, surprised when we um, moved into this house. I was very surprised when my parents could actually afford cars that were a little bit nicer than what they have had for several years. I was very surprised when, we could afford to, you know, buy certain things, brand new. Um, it just, when you grow up, you know, on a lower income, you just become so accustomed to things and you don't really think about it. I mean, I know some people who, frown upon the idea of wearing clothes until they, literally are falling apart. Um, I don't really understand that because that's all I've ever done. I don't just get rid of clothes just because, they're old or whatever. And I buy clothes that are a timeless style, a simple style, a timeless style. I don't keep up with trends. I don't do any of that. I like things that look nice and that are in style. And, I don't buy clothes very often, and I certainly don't buy brand new clothes very often. Um, you know, it just comes down to, you gotta make do with what you have, and you can't be worried about what other people think. Because growing up, you know, I never once thought about, like, what are people gonna think about, you know, my mom driving, a 15 to 20-year-old minivan. I never even thought about that. Like, that wasn't even a thought that came across my mind. Like, and honestly, I didn't even think it was old and beat up because I was so used to it that I wasn't even aware of it. Like, yes, it had, like, dirty carpet and stained seats and stuff, but I was so used to that I just was like, I didn't think anything of it, you know? And I did realize it when they finally, got another vehicle, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was like pretty worn out. But, I didn't think about it at the time because that's just what we had, you know? And so, there's just certain things that, I don't really think about. Um, I don't think about, what are people gonna think if something is old or whatever. I don't really worry about that. Now, I'm not saying that I don't buy nice things and I don't buy things occasionally to treat myself and stuff. I mean, I have done stuff like that. Like earlier this year, that bed frame behind me, I bought that brand new. And I never buy brand new furniture ever. Um, but, I had an old bed frame that I had pretty much my entire life. And, I just figured, you know, I'm 24 years old. Um, I think it would be nice to, like, get something that's a little bit nicer and stuff. And, it was brand new, but it wasn't, like, the most expensive thing. It was one of the cheaper ones on Amazon, and it looks nice. You don't have to have the most fancy thing to make your home look good. You don't have to have the most fancy clothes to make yourself look good. And that's just the bottom line. I mean, we don't have to have name brand shoes. We don't have to have name brand clothes. It's just, you know, making yourself look presentable is really all you need. You know, Because hear me out on this. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form, you know, just wear ratty old clothes that look like rags and stuff. That's not what I'm saying at all, you know. I think there's a balance, but, you know, there is some of that that's still ingrained in me because, you know, when I was growing up, you know, my parents didn't have the money just to go out and buy clothes. They didn't have the money just to go out and buy shoes. You know, I wear my tennis shoes until they are literally worn out. Like, worn all the way through the sole, all the way through, like, there's holes in them and stuff. I wear them out completely. You know, I just do. Um, and I do have some nicer shoes that I do wear for, you know, certain things that actually look decent, but my everyday walking shoes, if I'm just taking a walk outside, I really don't care. You know, I just put them on and they keep my feet clean, safe, and dry. That's all I need, you know? And like I said, I do have nicer shoes that I do wear, you know, but I do get cheaper shoes. I don't go out and, you know, buy $100 shoes. I won't do it. Um, it's just not gonna happen. Um, you know, there's certain things that, you know, you just you get used to living a certain way and you don't really think anything of it. You know, and not everything has to be perfect. You know, it's it's one of those things that I think has been lost in our culture. And people who went through times like the Great Depression and World War II were really good at that. Um, Honestly, better at that than I am. Um, they were very good at being resourceful, using things up, wearing things out, um, just all of that. Um, and, you know, we've kind of lost that in our culture. Like, anytime anything is even slightly outdated or slightly not our thing, we just automatically run out and buy something new all the time. Or, you know, whatever. And I'm here to tell you that that's not necessary, you know? Now, I'm not talking about people who have, you know, have the money to do it and it's not going to hurt them financially. You know, if you have the money and you want to do that, you go ahead. You do whatever you want to do, you know? But I can tell you that most people nowadays are in debt beyond belief. Most people are charging everything on a credit card and, you know, buying whatever they want to buy and not paying attention to what they're doing. And they're always buying new cars. They're always, you know, taking out loans for cars and all this stuff. And, you know, that's not necessary at all. You know, first of all, cut out the unnecessary spending. Um, you know, we're all guilty of it. You know, we can spend money on things that we don't really need, or, you know, money on extra money on things that we could have gotten cheaper, or, something like that. We're all guilty of it, myself included. But, if you're just out there, walking through the mall, buying a bunch of clothes, buying a bunch of stuff, and racking up massive amounts of debt, then that's just not smart at all. Um, you know, and like I said, that's part of what, being resourceful is just using what you have. Um, just trying to make things do, because honestly, we're in some pretty rough financial times right now, and it's not horrible. I mean, I watched my parents go through some stuff, during the 2008 stuff. Um, I'm not gonna share those details, but I saw them go through some stuff that really, you know, I was only 10 years old, and that really opened my eyes to, what you really need, in order to live. And it's just simple, It's, and I'm not gonna say that it wasn't hard at times. I'm sure it was. In fact, I know it was. But, we just made do with what we had, and made our budget stretch as much as we could, made our supplies stretch as much as we could, made our food stretch as much as we could. There was no vacations, there was no eating out at restaurants, there was no, there was not really a lot of that. Now, I will say that, there was the occasional, we would eat out like once in a great while, or, get something like McDonald's or something once in a while. But it wasn't an all the time thing. It really wasn't. Um, we made meals at home, we made food stretch, we did all we could, and, there were times that, you know, there were some necessities that my parents just couldn't afford, such as shoes and clothes and certain things, And when you go through stuff like that, I think it really builds you up to actually be thankful for what you have. Because those who grow up, and I'm not putting down people who have never gone through stuff at all, but what I'm saying is, when you grow up knowing that, we can't afford this for just about everything, just about any want, any, cool desire, any fun thing, really. When you hear, we can't afford that for a long time, you don't really miss it, It's kind of like, okay, so what? We can't, go to Disneyland or whatever. Not that we ever even considered that or wanted that, but I'm just using that as an example. you know, okay, so we can't go there, that's fine. We just can't afford it. That's just the bottom line. Period. You know, oh, we wanted, a new TV. Well, we just can't afford that, so we're not getting a new TV. You know, it's, you just learn to do the best with what you have. And, I can say that, because some people would look at the way I grew up and say, well, weren't you missing out on a bunch of stuff? I don't think I was missing out on anything. I don't think I missed out on a single thing because, you know what? Missing out on the cool stuff, quote unquote cool stuff, which I don't really care for that stuff anyway. It teaches you to be thankful. It teaches you to be, closer to your family. It teaches you to be closer to God. It teaches you to be, more aware of your finances. It teaches you not to go into debt. It teaches you not to, buy things you can't afford. It's just, that's just the bottom line. And, I know people who would look at the way I grew up and say, well, aren't you being deprived and stuff? There is no way that I ever thought that we were being deprived. Ever. We always had food on the table. We always had a roof over our head. We always had running water, electricity, heat, cooling. We always had that. And I never once thought that I was missing out on anything because we had all that we needed. Our home was clean. Our home was safe. It was well taken care of. And we did what we had to do. It was, when you grow up like that, you realize, what the most important stuff is. And from the time I was 10 years old until the time I was about 15 or 16, that was about the time frame that things were really, really tight for my parents, and really, there was a lot going on. And even still, there were times where it was tight and it was rough. But when I was about 15, almost 16 years old is when we moved into this house, and this is honestly one of the nicest places I've ever lived. And not that any of the other places we lived were not nice in any way. I mean, they were pretty nice for what they were. But I was shocked when my parents were even looking at this house and considering renting it. I was shocked. I was so surprised because, you know, our budget didn't really allow for much more than like 2 bedrooms or so, and that was pretty much it, you know, for the most part. And this is a 1,500 square foot house with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. It had been several years since we had lived in a house quite like this. I was shocked. You know, and I think, after you go through not having much, not having as big of a place to live, not having, you know, all the features you want and everything, when you step up into something like this, and, to some people, a 1,500 square foot house is small, but I can tell you, we lived in places that were under 1,000 square feet, and it was tight for 4 people. When you step up into something like this, you just feel so blessed and so honored and so rewarded because you've gone through living on so little for so long, and and then the same thing with vehicles. Like, my parents still have like 20 to 25-year-old vehicles, but they're the nicest and smoothest running vehicles I think we've ever had. I mean, are they perfect? No. But I'm still shocked because we always had cars that, one of them would run good, but we went through a period of time where every time we turned around, another car broke down or something happened. And we were just trying to keep us going. That's all we could do. And so it's kind of a surprise that we were able to afford certain things. And, I never thought about replacing cars. I just always thought you just drive them for as long as possible, and if they die, you just get another one, or you fix it. And most of the time, my mind was on fixing it. I never thought about replacing cars, really. It was like rare that I ever thought about that, unless it was just too far gone, which we had a couple that were too far gone. But it was interesting. And, my mom's minivan is running pretty good. It has a few things, like it doesn't have air conditioning and stuff, but otherwise, it runs so good. It runs so smooth, like, there's hardly anything that I notice that's going on with it. And she just talked about, like, well, we may consider replacing a vehicle at some point. And that was just interesting to me because I never really thought about that. And I'm like, oh, well, this feels like it's running good, you know. Now, I think it's wise to, put money away for a car, and for when the time comes, because, eventually a car is just going to have its time. And, it's going to need to be replaced. You know, and the newest car that I've ever seen my parents have is a 2005 Toyota. That's it. That's the newest we've had. You know? And when we got that, I thought that we were rich. I thought that we were living in luxury. That we had, you know, something real nice. Top of the line 2005 Toyota Sienna XLE. I thought we were living like kings and queens when we got that vehicle. When you grow up with very little. Now, we weren't deprived or anything. I mean, we were able to stock up, we were able to have things, we were able to have what we needed. But when you grow up not having